The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, Relmar McConnell Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome to the Science of Magic, a place where science and magic come together to transform fact into evolving truth. We can be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour we'll be exploring a river of light. My son called me from Wyoming the other day to tell me he and his friend had floated the Snake River. Normally they're in Colorado near Salida and floating the Arkansas. How was it, I asked. Totally different, but every bit as much fun. It's great learning a new river, he enthused. But you told me the Arkansas is different every time you rafted it, I reminded him. Yes, but some things are the same as well, like general location of the rapids and corners, depending on where you get in and out. You mean like living in the same location but during different seasons and experiencing different weather? Yeah, Mom, just like that. It struck me that this was very much like our personal horoscope. Depending on where and when you launch, your environment can vary, but you choose how to raft it. Two people could get in at pretty much the same space and create totally different experience depending on timing and intention. Personally, I've come to believe that as spirits, we choose when and where to incarnate, depending on what we want to experience or accomplish that particular lifetime. Two people can walk side by side for a lifetime, but due to differing birth dates and signs have totally dissimilar experience as they're actually on different rivers, so to speak. Two people that have the exact same sign, birth date, and place are sometimes referred to as astrological twins. While there are amazing similarities, they can still live their lives in very different ways. Even identical twins are not identical in physiology, temperament, astrological sign, or how they choose to live. We each have our own unique place and expression. Humanity is a river of light flowing from the finite to the infinite. Khalil Gibran. Every person has a distinctive frequency or bandwidth of light that they bring. There are many variables in addition to one's astrological chart which affects one's frequency, such as genetic makeup, race, culture, and family conditioning, experiences, gender, age, archetypical expressions, and so on. These are all part of the personal river we navigate each lifetime. If this is so, what good is it to study our astrological chart? And how can an astrologer hope to be accurate when there's so much more going on with each person? Well, it's simple. The more we know about the river, the more informed our choices on how to navigate it. Anyone planning a trip is always wise to take a map and check the weather. At the same time, the map and the weather report do not dictate our choices. If there's going to be snow in the high country, I may choose a route that avoids the mountain passes, but I still get to where I intend to go. In just this way, it's never wise to turn our power over to our chart or any other part of our personal river. Never forget who's holding the oars. When I'm working closely with others, I like to know their sign and chart, not to pry into their personal affairs, but rather to see where we mesh and where we may misunderstand each other at any given time. I can't tell you how many landmines I've avoided by simply comparing charts and tendencies with the important people in my life. At the same time, I do not pretend to know a person, what they're likely to do or be based on their chart. For me, it's all about mindful interaction and mutual respect. It's so easy to fall into the belief that our experience is the only valid one. Yet it's through acceptance of our differing expressions and the viewpoints that the truth can be found. Humanity is indeed a river of light flowing from the finite to the infinite. If even one of us is missing, there's a break in the flow. Our guest this hour is Amy Herring, a graduate of Stephen Forrest's Evolutionary Astrological Program and has been a professional astrologer for 20 years. She's written 2 books on astrology, Astrology of the Moon and Essential Astrology. Amy has served on the board of her local astrological organization and been a returning speaker at the Northwest Astrological Conference. Visit Amy at www.heavenlytruth.com for readings, classes, and educational videos. I'll introduce Amy and explore her views on the modern-day application of the ancient practice of astrology after this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic. Prior innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.scienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Amy Herring, a graduate of Stephen Forrest's Evolutionary Astrological Program and author of Astrology of the Moon and Essential Astrology. Her website, www.heavenlytruth.com. Amy, thank you so much for joining us on The Science of Magic.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Hey, would you mind telling us a little bit about Stephen Forrest's Evolutionary Astrological Program and why it's referred to as evolutionary?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Stephen Forrest is, he's been my mentor and many people's mentor at this point. And what he tries to do is just kind of gather people, like-minded people together. And he'll have sessions where you kind of focus on a basic area of astrology, one topic, and they'll talk about it and present and look at charts. And it just is a really great way to see astrology in action. He calls it evolutionary because the idea is that you grow with your chart. It's not a static, of course the planets stay in place and your natal chart doesn't change, but you change within it. And so the idea is not that astrology is supposed to define you or describe you, but to be a way to kind of see how you can progress within what that chart represents for you.
Oh, I like that a lot. So it's like we were talking earlier. It's just the river that you're on, and how you navigate it is really up to you, and whether you want to evolve or stay put. Is that kind of what you're saying there?
Yeah, exactly. He really focuses on working with the chart as a way to evolve kind of purposely.
Very good. So the art of astrology seems very complex with no two charts exactly the same. Do you find many people kind of oversimplify it at the cost of accuracy?
I think when you're first trying to, the symbols are so complex, and how they come together are so complex, and how people decide to interpret what they mean when they come together is so complex. So I think sometimes out of a desire to have a kind of a standard approach, that definitely there can be an oversimplification. And of course, a lot of popular astrology is very simplified to kind of be digestible in easy chunks to the general public.
Like the kind you find in the newspapers, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. How much does intuition play into reading a person's chart?
I think it can certainly play a lot into it. Just like our imagination or how we choose to express something. I can look at a symbol and understand the basic possible meanings and archetypes, but the stories I choose to tell, the way I choose to present it, that can all kind of come from the magic of the moment.
So do you kind of align with your client as you're doing that, so that you're kind of giving them back their own archetypical understandings, so it makes more sense to them?
I definitely try to, connect with them so that I can ground what I'm saying in their experience as much as possible, without, telling them exactly how to interpret it or what to think. Of course, they're free to do that. So, but trying to connect with them in a way that makes it so that I'm not talking just in the abstract, but can be a little more practical with it.
Yeah, to me that seems really important, because what was it my astrologist calls it, astrobabble. It's like he tries not to go too deep into the this planet's here and that one's there and this one's retrograde and this one's doing this and that. And I'm going, I'm so lost. But rather being able to be the bridge between that information and something that makes sense to your client. How do you manage that?
Yeah, I some people want to refrain from any astrobabble, as you put it, and I think that that's a great approach, because what you're trying to do is just communicate with the client, and you are kind of the one that's supposed to read the map. But sometimes I do find that it can kind of be nice to explain to people just a little bit about why you're saying the things you're saying, but not so much that they're starting to have to do the work that they just don't know how to do. So you really do have to be careful of overwhelm. And not just because of the astrological terms, but also the kinds of things you choose to talk about and choose to amplify. There's always so much going on in a chart that you can overwhelm people, where now they can't hear anything because it's just too much.
I hear you there. Yeah. And how do you sort this stuff out? It's like if somebody doesn't have any experience at all with their chart, oftentimes you find they come to you looking for you to tell them what's going to happen, and you have to kind of educate them otherwise.
Yeah, I do find that happens. I mean, most of the time when people find me through my books or my website, they've, done a little bit of exploring, and so, I make it clear that I don't predict events. And I say it specifically in that way because, of course, I do look at the future, and the future trends is what I call it, to see where the planets are going to be at certain times and how that's going to interact with their chart. But again, like you'd said before, I can't predict their choices, and I would never even attempt to do that. Kind of trying to remove free will, I think, is practically impossible, and certainly not a great way to go about it.
And how many people do you think really exercise free will? Aren't a lot of people just kind of sitting in victim and not being proactive around their chart?
I don't tend to find a lot of people like that, and maybe it's just the kind of people that I attract, but, I make it really clear from the outset that if you want to know what's going to happen to you, I'm not your astrologer. If you want to know what you can make happen and how you can work with it, then, then I'm your girl.
Amy, I love that. I just love it. Very well put. Let's talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about Mercury retrograde. It seems to be something that everybody knows, more or less, and we're moving into it. And it seems like people dread it. Oh, you can't sign contracts. There's going to be a lack of communication. Bad things happen. It's very restrictive. But what I've found as a practitioner, and I'm a shamanic practitioner, is that it's a beautiful opportunity to make another pass over issues that we may have skimmed over before and go a little deeper in our personal processing. Would you speak to it a little bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely. It's true that because Mercury retrograde, that phrase has kind of gotten into more of the public consciousness, then it's easier to get a lot of misinformation about it, or just again to react a little too strongly. Mercury goes retrograde, several times a year, and of course it's not the only planet that does that. Whatever planet is going retrograde for a period of time, and again, just to be clear, that's where the planet appears to be moving backwards, even though it actually isn't. It's just our viewpoint. It's representative of kind of that energy changing direction. So yes, you could certainly say because Mercury rules communication, thought, how we express that thought, how we make sense of the world in certain ways, certainly that anything that's kind of ruled by that, communication devices, that kind of thing, we could say, that you might have to gird your loins when it comes to that. But I think really the point, and again that you made, is that it's really a chance to rethink. Retrograde, the first two letters are RE, and RE words are kind of a good way to look at retrograde periods. So with Mercury, because it's thinking and communication, to rethink, to go over information, to make sure that you've got it right. A lot of times when people, complain that something has gone wonky during a Mercury retrograde period, it's kind of like it's not that brought that on, or that's when that happened. It's when that came to light. So there may have been a miscommunication, let's say months ago, and now it comes to light. And so that's actually a great opportunity, although it's a hassle. Certainly, I would never deny that it can't be a hassle, but it's a good time to smooth those out and clean those up.
Yeah, I find it a very rich time for myself and for my clients to, like I said, take another layer into things that might be restricting our lives, but we skimmed over the last time. And if I view it that way and don't try to push the river and move forward in certain ways, I don't usually have much trouble with Mercury being retrograde. Is that what you find?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. Again, just kind of work with the energy in the way that it's going to kind of, flow with the river, as you said.
So what about the newer planets that have shown up? It's like they've always been there, but we're now just taking them into consideration. How does that affect the accuracy of astrology, and who decides what influences they have, or where does this information come from?
That's a challenging question. I mean, it's not like there's some council that, decides it and kind of sends it down to us lower peons necessarily. It's really about observing what happens in the collective, the consciousness, the events that are happening in the world during the time of discovery. I think that, a lot of people will say things like, of course, even, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto can be looked at as newer because the first, 7 planets were, kind of the law there for a long time. And so people will sometimes say, well, does that mean all the old charts were inaccurate because Uranus, for example, was there the whole time, but we didn't know about it? I think actually it means a lot when something is in our consciousness. And so the longer we sit with it, the more it has a kind of a chance to have that ripple effect. And so astrologers try to observe that ripple effect and correlate it, not as a causal thing, but just a correlation with what's happening in the consciousness and the planets that are coming to light.
So basically, astrology in that way of looking at it is like the collective consciousness and the effect it has on the whole?
Sure, yeah, and all we can do, I mean, of course, all astrologers can do is just try to observe it.
And then through observation, start to discern what tendencies are coming to the fore as a result of the new discovery. Is that what?
Yeah, try to make correlations and try to express what those seem. And, of course, test it in charts, test their own experience, test their client's experience. Be open to learning, to knowing that you really don't know what it means yet, and you're trying to gather that information by observation and correlation.
So how can a person be empowered by their chart rather than subject themselves to fate, if you will? What's your recommendation on that?
I think, it kind of comes out in all the language that I use when I express somebody's chart to them. I will say things like there might be a tendency for you to, feel a certain way, and that might, want you to have you interacting this way, but you have a choice to decide what this means to you. So I'm always kind of pushing the idea that this isn't what is happening to you. This is kind of what you're made of, and what are you going to choose to build from that? There's a lot of flexibility in astrology, and that's usually not what people expect. correct, especially because in popular astrology it's very descriptive. So if you're a Cancer, you're supposed to love your family and want to have babies. If you're a Gemini, apparently you can't be trusted because you spill secrets. It's just such a cliche that a lot of people have determined that if they are empowered enough that they want to believe that they act with free will, they're not going to be interested in astrology. And if they aren't, if it's the opposite, if they want to be told what to do or how they are, then they might be drawn to astrology for the wrong reasons.
Got it. We're going to have to take a short break. This is just wonderful information. And so we're going to return to our discussion after this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Do you want to hear more? Previous broadcasts of innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. Visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our special guest this hour is Amy Herring, a graduate of Stephen Forrest's Evolutionary Astrological Program and the author of Astrology of the Moon and Essential Astrology. Her website, www.heavenlytruth.com. I love the name of your website, Amy.
Oh, thank you.
Let's talk about evolution as a whole. Do you see a common theme in charts that you would attribute to these evolutionary times that we're in?
I can't say that I do specifically. I mean, what I will see is, kind of groups of people, of course, that were born around the same times. They often carry a certain evolutionary signature because the outer planets, Uranus and especially Neptune and Pluto, of course, remain in a sign for so long because they're so far away from where we are that they seem to take quite a while to travel through those designated areas of sky that we call signs. So a lot of people around similar ages, will have the same placements. Now, if they're born at a different time of day, it will certainly vastly change, but they'll still have those planets in the same signs, and so they kind of carry that signature.
So by evolutionary signature, you mean the soup they're dancing in, if you will?
Oh, I'm sorry, say that again?
By evolutionary signature, you mean kind of like the soup they're dancing in, or the components they have to work with?
Yeah, a little bit. I think that not only is it that kind of soup, but there's it's kind of a two-way street. People born with a Pluto in like Sagittarius, let's say, they can encompass several years, and that kind of mini generation is not only growing up in Pluto and Sagittarius times, but they are going to kind of incubate that and then bring it forward, into other Plutonian times when they grow up.
Got it. Okay. So do you do comparative charts for two or more people? And what do you see as the value of doing so?
Because I specialize so much in kind of the psychological, internal, spiritual view, I tend to not do chart comparisons anymore in my practice, but they're certainly absolutely valuable. I just haven't chosen to focus on them. And the reason is anytime you compare two charts, it's kind of like being able to see a little bit inside the inner workings of how they interact with each other. And some of the most simple knots, that can be just from miscommunication or misunderstanding what another person needs, what another person is asking of that other person, can be untangled by looking at that.
Yeah, I find it amazing. I have different astrologers I refer people to that are having difficulties, and I get a sensing that they're not really having difficulties with each other, but just in their communication style or where they are at any given time with the energies around them, and it really seems useful. So I'm glad you found value in it as well. And it seems there are as many interpretation of charts as there are people out there doing them. Why do you think that is, and how does a person know which one to go by?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it really, a lot of people like to refer to astrology as a science, but, yes, the determination of where the planets are and how they, align with each other is certainly mathematical. But beyond that, it's really an art. It's interpretation. You bring in intuition. You bring in your life experience. So anytime you're explaining a chart to somebody, you can do your best to work with the archetypes and explain them, but you're going to bring your own biases, your own stories, your own history. And, so that always colors it. And that's something that I think when people are looking at astrology from a scientific point of view that they don't like, because there can feel like there's too much variance. And I can agree as far as from that perspective, there is too much variance to call it a science. But when you're talking about trying to match yourself up, I mean, it's even when you go to a counselor, a therapist of some kind, it's really about the magic of what's happening between the two of you. So yes, it's their training, yes, it's their experience and their point of view, but then it's the dynamic between the two of you, and of course that's going to change from person to person, regardless of their training. And it's kind of the same principle.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I have a degree in psychology, and I certainly see this in counseling, is that the key is the chemistry, because if you try to make too much of a science out of it, you're not coming from your heart, you can't connect with the person, and it's not as near as effective as when you can be human and touch in, but that's not real scientific. So it's a real dance, isn't it?
It really is, and I think it really just depends on what you're expecting from it, because, when you go to different people, they can give you different perspectives, and sometimes that's exactly what you need.
Right, because there's more than one way to look at a thing, and the more ways we look at things, the closer we can come to the real whole truth, I believe.
Certainly. I mean, a lot of times I'll tell people, I'm going to try to communicate this to you, but certainly give me feedback sometimes even if I just don't use the right language, it can be the difference between a blank stare and an aha moment.
Exactly. keep trying is what I say. Just keep trying. In my shamanic practice, I've come to observe people that have been harshly judged against for the very traits they exhibit due to their astrological sign. And my favorite example is of a Leo being taken to task for being flashy or show-offs as children. And what I find is these people tend to be very conflicted about their natural charisma, and subsequently they hide it. Have you seen this? And so how do you work with it with a person?
Yeah, I think, any sign certainly can be, made a cartoon of. And, when that happens, of course, that person is suddenly hiding their traits that they deem not socially acceptable. And then it comes out in different ways. So, for example, in the Leo example, I think it comes from not understanding what that urge is. And it goes back to, astrology as description or prescription. So if we're trying to describe a Leo as flashy and a bit of a show-off, first of all, we're going to be wrong at least half the time, because we can all think of an example of a Leo that's not that way. So to try to guess how people are going to act like that kind of misses the point. When you understand, I think, the purpose of any sign, maybe what it wants to learn, what it craves, what it needs, then you're starting to get into the right language. And what Leo needs to do is express. So it's not about, the flashy or the show off. That's kind of a side effect sometimes, especially if they haven't been able to express if they've been shamed for it.
Exactly. So it doesn't come out natural, and it seems forced, and people take objection to it. And what I've found is if the more a person can relax into their tendencies, the more creative they can be with the way they use it, rather than denying it and having it bubble forth in a distorted form. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And, all the things in your chart, when I talk about the entire chart, that's kind of what I try to do is say, hey, this is what this wants. This is what this is about in you. And so the more you can find healthy ways to express that and kind of be on the lookout for the kind of pitfalls and traps that don't get you what you want, but that's still where those urges come from. And just so to understand where the urges come from can empower somebody to work with them in a way that gets them what they want.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And not identifying overly with our chart, but just recognizing that these are our tools this lifetime. What are we going to do with them?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us a little about your latest book, Essential Astrology. Does it show a novice how to work with their own chart?
Yeah, absolutely. It aims, I certainly could say it's a beginning astrology book in the sense that especially the first half is really about introducing you to all the symbols, the planets, signs, and houses and aspects. Those are things that aren't commonly known, and so you can get more deeply into it, start to learn how to read a chart from the very basics to, understanding what all the symbols mean and that kind of thing. And then the second half is really meant to, have people work with practicing reading the symbology of the chart, and getting more confident with that. I find a lot of people, they'll get a beginning astrology book, and they'll just be able to dive in and eat it up. And then when they start to actually try to work with a chart, it's overwhelming. So the second half of the book, I really wanted to address that to help people understand how to really take what they know that they know and learn how to express it and integrate it.
Oh, that's sounds like a beautiful tool. The chart is based on space as it appears from Earth. Is that correct?
Right. There are practices of astrology that are heliocentric, which are putting the sun in the center, but most astrology is geocentric, so everything that we observe is from the point of view of Earth. So, for example, it looks like the sun goes around us. We obviously know that we orbit the sun, but because of that, how that looks, that's what we're addressing. And so everything about astrology is how you observe it. And so I always like to say to people, you really are the center of the universe as far as astrology is concerned.
We're going to have to take a break. I'm sorry. I want to take up on this on the other side of this short break. We'll be back on the flip side. You're listening to The Science of Magic, the place where altruistic professionals of science and the esoteric create common ground for the betterment of our world. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, bringing together gifted people of service to the world. Our website is www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Amy Herring, a graduate of Stephen Forrest's Evolutionary Astrological Program and author of Astrology of the Moon and Essential Astrology. Her website, heavenlytruth.com. Amy, we were just talking about the perspective that the chart takes. In other words, you draw out this chart, but there's several different ways of looking at it, I understand. One is, the most common is the one where we're viewing space from our perspective on Earth. Is that correct?
Right. Mostly it's geocentric, which is Earth in the center.
And that looks like the sun's evolving around the Earth. But the way I look at it is that's really a good representation of the way the energies from the different planets and the sun hit us at any given time, because it's from out there towards us. Is that the thought behind it?
Well, exactly. Again, in astrology, you are the center of your universe, and that's fitting because everyone's the center of their own universe. You can't step outside of your experience. So to look at how things look to you is kind of the point.
And so that's why birth, time, and place are so important.
Exactly. What we're trying to do is see how the heavens would look at the exact, not only just where you are, but the exact place you are and the exact time that you were born, because of course the sky is constantly moving from our perspective here.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because while you in astrology work with the way the planets affect the Earth and the way the sun and moon affects the Earth, the frequencies that line up at any given time, the sun is also moving through the galaxy, and there's interrelations that are changing out there. Is that factored in any way?
Not in, I think, common practice, but it's because astrology is so vast and so versatile that there are all kinds of areas of astrology. What people are usually exposed to and, kind of commonly go to see an astrologer for, is a look at their natal chart, the natal reading, which is how the heavens and certain bodies in it were aligned at the time of your birth. But there's so many offshoots. There's so many ways to look at that. There are people, an astrologer, Philip Sedgwick, he's in Arizona. He does a lot of work with the galactic center, with asteroids, and and he's not alone. There are a lot of people that want to look at all facets that are possible and study them, and more power to them. It's great.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot the Mayan calendar was built on, and it has its own astrology in its own way, but it's way vastly complex. We think regular astrology is complex. That thing just gives you a headache thinking about it. In medicine and or in shamanism, for that matter, it's never wise to work on oneself. So what are the downsides of doing your own chart, and how do you steer people around that?
Yeah, it's certainly a great idea to check in, absolutely, and kind of check in with your own chart. And so I certainly would encourage people to do that. But there's a certain point where, we go to our best friend or our spouse or somebody, because we need to talk about something, because we need a new perspective. And it's the same reason you'd go to another astrologer. When you're looking at your chart, you are hearing your own same voice, your own perspective, and most of the time that's fine. But if you need to hear another story in order to kind of jog something loose for yourself, you need to go to a different source.
Very well put. Very well put. Before we run out of time, Amy, would you mind telling people where they can find your books?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the easiest way is online. They're usually in bookstores, but that can kind of be hit and miss because sometimes astrology sections are pretty small these days. So online at any of the popular sites, Amazon. You can go to Llewellyn.com, who's my publisher. They do a lot of that kind of esoteric kind of topic. So they're a rich resource.
Very nice. And I just have to ask, how did you become interested in astrology in the first place?
Oh, I think I was always interested in how people work, from the beginning, before I even knew about astrology. And then, of course, was exposed in kind of high school, junior high to the horoscopes in the newspaper, and certainly chuckled. But it was not until a community education class was offered in my area, and I thought, well, how can you have a whole class about astrology? Because of course I was exposed to the same kind of limited popular view that everyone else is at first, and so I decided to take the class. I was curious, and after the first class, I was a total goner.
So where would you suggest someone begin if they want to study astrology?
I would definitely say it's a really good way to start by reading. Reading books that aren't just, again, don't go with the horoscopes. They just, not to be disparaging of horoscopes, but there's such a way to get misinformation there that it's kind of a waste of time if you're trying to learn serious astrology. It's an okay opener, but a book is a great place. And then after that, the more you can connect with a teacher, the more they're going to be able to ground it for you. Like, for example, I don't tend to teach big classes. I tend to teach a focus on tutoring because I really like the one-on-one interaction where you can really ground what you've learned in books. And so I think book is a good place to start, but not a good place to finish, as if we're ever finished.
It's just not alive, right? It goes so far, and then you need that interaction piece. So why do you think people are skeptical of astrology? And what do you say to them?
If somebody tells me they're skeptical, I mean, honestly, good. Most people are so exposed to misinformation about it. To be skeptical means that you are not swallowing whatever you're given on the first try. You go and investigate it. The problem is that there's a difference between, an honest skeptic and somebody who's just more closed and critical, who hears one thing from popular culture and then assumes that that's representative of the entire craft and then uses it to disparage astrology without being educated. So by all means, be skeptical of anything you encounter. And I've known a lot of people who have actually become a professional astrologers because they were so skeptical at the beginning. They wanted to get down to the bottom of it to disprove astrology and ended up having their mind changed. So, whatever route people go, I certainly invite them to question, absolutely, but then to find the answers, not to just stop there.
Got it. So do you see any dangers or downsides in using astrology? Is there anything an astrologer can't or shouldn't do?
I guess that would be a matter of opinion. There are a lot of ancient practices that I don't think necessarily fit into the modern culture. For example, like trying to predict someone's death. I don't see any benefit from that, and never mind the question of accuracy. So things like that, I think you certainly have to be careful. Also, the dangers of astrology. It's almost like you can kind of make yourself worked up over something that you know a little bit too much, and it makes it harder to interact organically with life because you kind of second guess yourself and start to worry about the doom of a certain planetary placement, which almost never actually happens the way you thought it would.
That's so well put, Amy. It's all you can see is the tendencies, but life is always popping surprises our direction, isn't it?
It certainly is, and the more you can keep, I think, open to that, the more you can, interact from a genuine space instead of trying to control it or, hide under the bed, as I like to say.
Amy, this has been absolutely delightful. I can't thank you enough for being on the show, and I wish you all the best with your books and your profession. So this has been The Science of Magic. Remember, you can always listen to past thought-provoking episodes on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. Until next time, dear ones, may you be blessed with knowledge and comforted with love as you journey on your personal river of light.